What causes type 2 diabetes? Now, if you listen to many of the influencers and so-called pundits on the web, it's carbs that get demonized. Eat too many carbs, and of course, the pundits don't tell you what type of carb, and your blood sugar goes skyrocketing, so you'll end up with diabetes. But is that really what the science tells us? And aside from a whole food plant-based diet in that equation, what role does intermittent fasting play? Well, thankfully, tonight we are joined by a distinguished scientist and researcher from the Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine, Dr. Hana Kahleova, whose research has focused on this very topic. And she'll share the latest research and knowledge to ensure we truly understand what the science says. Good evening and welcome to plant-powered Metro New York's Heart to Healthy Heart, plant-based conversations that will save your life. And we've just brought on the screen my co-hosts, Judy and Ben. Good evening. And we are so thrilled you could be here. We want to encourage everyone to use the chat box to tell us where you're viewing from, as well as to ask any questions of our special guest. And we'll try to get to as many as time allows us. And at this point, let me bring on our special guest and do a quick introduction. We might need to do a little bit right here. It is Dr. Hana Kahleova, who is a board-certified endocrinologist with a PhD in human physiology and pathophysiology and a board certification in lifestyle medicine. She serves as Director of Clinical Research at the Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine, and her research focuses on nutrition treatment of obesity, diabetes, and metabolic disease. She's published close to 100 scientific papers in peer-reviewed medical journals. As a member of the American Diabetes Association and as a board member of the Diabetes and Nutrition Study Group of the European Association for the Study of Diabetes, Dr. Kahleova is directly involved in the process of updating the nutritional recommendations for people with diabetes. Dr. Kahleova, welcome and thank you for joining us tonight.
Thank you so much for the kind introduction. And I loved how you asked the question, is it really the carbs that cause diabetes? This is something that we'd like to tackle tonight. What role does nutrition play in developing diabetes and in treating diabetes? Can a plant-based diet be effective in treating diabetes? And then the second part, can intermittent fasting be effective in treating diabetes? So let me share my screen and let's dive into our presentation. Okay, so here we go. 3 out of 4 men and 2 out of 3 women are overweight or obese in the United States. And when we're looking at the causes, as you mentioned, many times people think it's the carbs. But guess what? The Adventist Health Study 2 showed us that there's a linear relationship between the animal product consumption and the body mass index. In other words, if you're not consuming any animal products, if you're on a vegan diet, then you're much leaner compared with somebody who's more liberal with animal product consumption, compared with lacto-vegetarians who consume dairy and eggs, compared with pescatarians who consume fish, semi-vegetarian.
I think your slides are not advancing, so I want to make sure that we get that working right.
How do we fix that? Let's see. Let me share again.
Yep.
So
and then go to the full screen for on the slideshow view. That should do it.
Entire screen. Yep.
Yeah, entire screen. Yep.
But it's not really letting me share at this point. Okay.
If you go down to present and you go where it says slides.
And entire screen.
Yep. There we go. Got it now. I see it.
And how about now?
And there we go. Okay, now it's perfect. Fantastic.
Okay. Is it moving forward? Wonderful. Yeah, thank you for letting me know. Please note that vegans are the only group whose average BMI is within the healthy range. You know that the healthy range is between 20 and 25. So vegans have a BMI of 23.6 on average in the Adventist Health Study 2. And look at the difference between vegans and non-vegetarians who consume, not only dairy and eggs, but also some meat. 28.8. That's more than a 5-point difference between vegans and non-vegetarians. But you see, there's a big gap also between vegans and lacto-ovo-vegetarians, more than 2 points of a BMI. And so the average BMI of lacto-ovo-vegetarians is 25.7, which already puts them in an overweight range. I don't know about you, but this just blows me away. You see clearly that moving away from the animal products is the best you can do for your waistline. And that's consuming fruits and vegetables and grains and legumes. And guess what? These foods are rich in carbohydrates. The linear relationship between animal product consumption and BMI is also mirrored in diabetes prevalence being the lowest among vegans. And look at the difference. Vegans have a 3 times lower risk of diabetes compared with non-vegetarians. So it's clear, it's the animal products that drive putting on weight and being at risk of developing diabetes. So the main question is here is, if someone who's on a standard American diet decides to go vegan, how much will they benefit? Will they lose weight? Will their diabetes improve? And the answer is absolutely. Vegan diets promote weight loss, roughly a pound a week, which is what we see consistently in our studies. So in one study that Dr. Barnard conducted in 2005, these participants lost 13 pounds in 14 weeks, so roughly a pound a week, and 2 inches around their waistline, which makes gene shopping more enjoyable. I confirmed these findings in people with type 2 diabetes, compared with a traditional portion control diet. The participants on a vegan diet lost 14 pounds in 12 weeks, and they were able to sustain the weight loss over the long run. And guess what? They lost the visceral fat around the inner organs, much more than the control group, which we know that the visceral fat is the metabolically most dangerous fat. So if you lose that one, that automatically presents benefits for your metabolism and also cardiovascular health. Why is it that vegan diets help with weight loss? The short answer is it's about energy density. Obviously, fruits and vegetables and whole grains and legumes fill up our stomach much more than the same amount of calories consumed from animal products or some sources of fat, such as oil. It's also about fiber, and that promotes satiety. It's about improved gut microbiome. And we could talk about each of these topics like in a separate lecture. One aspect that I'd like to mention is that some people believe that in order to lose weight, you need to count your calories. But guess what? In our studies, we always give people a vegan diet that's ad libitum with no calorie counting, and they still lose weight. Why is it? Well, first, the fiber they're consuming fills them up so much that sometimes they, even though they can eat as much as they like, sometimes they feel so full that they limit their caloric intake without even knowing about it. But the second explanation is that some foods increase the energy expenditure, how many calories we're burning. When you eat a meal, when you eat breakfast, lunch, and dinner, your energy expenditure goes up and you also warm up. You know that when it's chilly outside, you come inside and eat a meal, and now you warm up and you're like, oh, this is so good. You feel so warm. That's because of the thermic effect of food. Because when you eat a meal, there's a certain amount of energy released in the form of heat. And wouldn't that be wonderful to just eat anything you wanted and you would burn the extra energy in the form of heat? How would you like that? Well, guess what? Some foods really enable you to do that. Which foods are those? In one study, they gave people two sandwiches, one with white bread, the other one with whole grain bread. And after the white bread, the thermic effect of food was 50% lower compared with the whole grain bread, which suggests that whole foods, are just increasing the thermic effect of food, and this is what we should be consuming. What would happen if we put people on a vegan diet? Does it affect their thermic effect of food? Will they burn more calories? The answer is yes. We conducted a few studies. Dr. Barnard conducted one, and I led another one that was published in 2020. We measured the thermic effect of food at baseline and then after 16 weeks on a vegan diet. And in Dr. Barnard's study, the thermic effect of food was 16% higher. In the second study I led, it was 14% higher. So roughly 15% higher thermic effect of food. That means you're burning 15% more calories after each meal you eat. How do you like that? So potentially you could eat 15% more calories without gaining weight. Or if you eat the same amount of calories, you will automatically start losing weight. This is just amazing. This is unique. This is something that a vegan diet is really special for. And the thermic effect of food. And one more aspect that I'd like to mention that's specific to diabetes is the mechanism behind diabetes, which is one is insulin resistance, when the cells in our body are not responding to the insulin that the body is producing. And weight loss definitely helps with that. But what about the beta cell function? The beta cells in our pancreas produce insulin, and as people put on extra weight, this places a huge demand on the insulin producing beta cells in the pancreas. And by the time type 2 diabetes is diagnosed, about 50% of the beta cells are gone. Can we reverse it with a vegan diet? And the answer is yes. A vegan diet in one of our studies that we conducted was actually beneficial for beta cell function, and the beta cell function, or the ability to produce insulin as a function of rising plasma glucose, was improved after 16 weeks on a vegan diet. So this is really encouraging because the vegan diet can address the underlying causes of diabetes. Okay, so I'd like to encourage you to load up on all those carbohydrate-rich foods, such as fruits and vegetables and whole grains and legumes, because those are the foods that help your beta cells and help with your weight management and help with your insulin sensitivity. Moving on to our next topic tonight, which is, when is it good to eat? When you eat the same meal, it will not have the same effects on your body. You will deposit more fat after the evening meal compared with the morning meal. People who eat breakfast have a lower body mass index compared with those who usually skip breakfast, even though the total amount of calories may be higher in those who consume breakfast regularly. In one weight loss study, the researchers looked at the early eaters who started their meals early and also finished their meals early in the day versus the late eaters. And the early eaters were losing more weight on the same diet. So if there's one meal that you should definitely eat, it's breakfast. Breakfast has been shown to reduce the risk of type 2 diabetes by 20 to 39% in the health professionals follow-up study. If someone already has diabetes, breakfast is critical for glycemic control and reduces the mean glucose by 20% throughout the day. So, should we eat breakfast every day? Absolutely. What if you're not hungry for breakfast, though? Then my next question is, well, what did you have for dinner? I believe that everything was great, everything was delicious, but maybe it was just too much food. So next time, make dinner the lightest meal of the day, and you'll be looking forward to your breakfast. And guess what? Extra points if you can skip dinner. And that's the topic of a study that we conducted a few years ago uh, when we compared 6 small meals, breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and snacks in between, and the second dinner, with only 2 meals a day, breakfast and lunch. The same diet, the same amount of calories, only different timing of the meals. And the findings were fascinating. People lost weight on both of these diets, but they lost more weight on 2 meals a day, marked as B2. They also lost more liver fat. Their insulin sensitivity improved more on 2 meals a day. Their A1C as a marker of glycemic control improved about the same. But the fasting blood sugar dropped more on 2 meals a day. So did the fasting insulin. And what was surprising, people were experiencing less depressive symptoms on 2 meals a day, and they felt less hungry. Can you believe it? When people were joining the study, they were like, I know I can do the 6 meals a day, but doctor, I don't know if I can do the 2 meals a day. That sounds like I'll be starving in the evening. I don't know if I can do it. Hey, after 12 weeks, people completely loved it. And most of them decided to stick to the 2 meals a day, even when the study was over. So that brings us to the ancient proverb: eat breakfast like a king, lunch like a prince, and dinner like a pauper. So uh, we covered just some basics, how plant-based nutrition can improve diabetes, how intermittent fasting can be helpful for diabetes. So I'm hoping it makes sense, and I'm open for your questions.
Thank you so much, Doc. Judy, why don't you take it away?
Okay. Hi, Dr. Kahleova. So, since so many people believe that carbohydrates cause type 2 diabetes, can you explain the role of saturated fat in insulin resistance and type 2 diabetes?
Absolutely. This is a fascinating topic. And there's some research that I personally conducted that kind of helps elucidate this topic. So I showed you one study with a plant-based diet where people were losing more weight and their visceral fat was diminishing. We also measured their insulin resistance, which was diminished on a plant-based diet. What we also measured is the cell membrane composition, because the fat you eat becomes a part of you, becomes a part of the cell membranes that you have in your body. Now, if you're consuming a lot of saturated fat from the animal products, then your cell membranes will be more rigid. And that causes insulin resistance because the insulin receptor is embedded in the cell membrane. If the cell membranes are more rigid, you know that, for example, butter or coconut oil, they're solid fats, right? That's what's kind of happening inside the cell membranes. And if you're consuming fats mainly from the plant kingdom, the polyunsaturated and monounsaturated fats, they make the cell membranes more flexible. So that improves the insulin sensitivity. But guess what? It's not only about the composition of the fat, it's also about the amount. And it's not only about the cell membranes, but it's also about what's happening inside the cells. One fascinating experiment showed that after a fatty meal, the liver fat content can increase by as much as 35%. That's only 6 hours after a fatty meal. So I know that's not very encouraging, but when you have fat inside your muscle and liver cells, that impairs the insulin sensitivity. So it's the composition of the cell membranes, it's fat inside the cells. All of these are mechanisms that contribute to insulin resistance. Now the question is, what happens if I set all the animal products aside, and if I keep the fat content of my vegan diet low? Am I able to get rid of the extra fat that's stored inside the cells, inside the muscle cells and liver cells where it doesn't belong to? And the encouraging answer is yes. We conducted a study with 244 overweight people, and we were sending a subset of them to Yale University for a magnetic resonance spectroscopy of the liver and muscle. And we showed that after 16 weeks on a vegan diet, the liver fat was reduced by 34%, and the muscle fat was reduced by 10%. And people, were losing weight. They improved their insulin sensitivity, and even their beta cell function, the function of the beta cells in the pancreas that produce insulin, improved significantly. So all of the mechanisms, that play a role in developing diabetes, all of these mechanisms were addressed by the low-fat vegan diet.
Wow,
I hope that answered your question.
Well, more than answered it. That's amazing. But this is a very broad topic, but I'm going to try. How does type 2 diabetes or prediabetes affect cardiovascular health?
That's a wonderful topic. That's a really good question, because diabetes is for people with diabetes, it's not the blood sugar that would be the main killer for them. It's the heart disease that's the number one killer. And there are a few mechanisms, but mainly in people with diabetes, we see an accelerated rate of atherosclerosis. In other words, atherosclerosis, or building up the plaques in your arteries, that happens much faster in people with diabetes compared with general population. Why is it? Well, it's because of the insulin resistance that plays a role, some changes in gut microbiome, and lower abundance of strains of bacteria that produce the short chain fatty acids that would promote insulin sensitivity and would protect the heart. That also plays a role. And the extra weight is another independent factor. And of course, people with diabetes have other issues, such as increased cholesterol and LDL cholesterol, increased blood pressure, and other health issues that also contribute to higher risk of cardiovascular disease. And the good news is that all of these can be addressed by a vegan diet. You don't need a separate diet for your heart and another one for your diabetes and another one for your blood pressure. All of these will be addressed with a vegan diet.
Thank you.
Hi, Dr. Kahleova. Excellent presentation. Fantastic. One question. Once you have the once you are pre-diabetic and once you have diabetes type 2 or cardiovascular disease, can it also reverse the whole food plant-based diet? Can it reverse this situation?
This is a fantastic question and a favorite one of mine, because we see it every day. Sometimes people go on a vegan diet and we start seeing improvements pretty much in the first few days and weeks. And sometimes people, get such great results that they get off all their medications and their A1C is normal, which means they no longer have diabetes. But I need to say that it's individual. Some people may not reverse their diabetes completely. It depends on the reserve of their beta cells, which we don't know when people start the vegan diet. So for some people, it's a complete success and they can reverse diabetes completely. But the good news is that everybody will see some improvements. No matter of whether you will be able to reverse diabetes completely, you will see some degree of improvements and you will benefit from the vegan diet in terms of being able to reduce your medications with healthy body weight, and improving your cholesterol and other cardiovascular risk factors.
That's great. What does the research show regarding the impact of GLP-1 inhibitors like Ozempic on blood glucose levels and weight control?
Yeah, the GLP-1 analogs are, heavily advertised. These medications are mostly injectables. Some of them are oral, and GLP-1 is an incretin that's secreted in our gut when we eat a meal. And we did a fascinating experiment on this topic. We invited people with type 2 diabetes to our lab, and they ate 2 sandwiches in a random order. One of them contained meat. The other one was a vegan sandwich. Both of them had the same amount of energy. Both had the same amount of calories. And we measured the GLP-1 secretion. And as you know, people with diabetes have a diminished secretion of incretins, including GLP-1 after meals. So after the meat sandwich, the line was pretty flat. There was no increase in GLP-1 after the meal. It was just flat. But after the vegan sandwich, we saw a nice peak in GLP-1 secretion, which could be compared to an increase that we see with sitagliptin, which is one of the DPP-4 inhibitors, or one of the medications that have been specifically developed to treat this condition. So a vegan diet is not only good for your heart and diabetes, it's also good for your GLP-1 secretion. So this is one of the mechanisms why a vegan diet promotes healthy body weight and improves diabetes.
And way cheaper, correct?
That's right. Yep.
Judy, take the last question.
Okay. Dr. Kahleova, I'm sure you were aware there was a paper presented to the American Heart Association earlier this year that was kind of surprising because it found that people who were eating, doing intermittent fasting were at much higher risk of dying from cardiovascular disease. And I know that a lot of people were scared off by that study, although if we take a deeper dive into it, I'd like to hear your thoughts.
This is a really good question. These were findings from an observational study. And as you know, there are some confounders in observational studies. Sometimes you see like a correlation, but it's not a causal relationship. So we need to be careful about interpreting these observational findings. That's number one. Number two, there are many ways how you can do intermittent fasting. some people skip breakfast and they believe it's giving them benefits. But I showed you some findings that breakfast is actually the most important meal of the day. So if you're eating breakfast and lunch and skipping dinner, that's a much healthier way of intermittent fasting than skipping breakfast and eating only lunch and dinner. So that's number two. And I see this many times that people believe that intermittent fasting means skipping breakfast. That's not the best way. So this may be another reason, because people who skip breakfast, studies show that this increases the risk of diabetes, but also cardiovascular disease. So this could be the link that was observed in this observational study. And as a side note, I'd like to also tell you that this is a topic that I studied in one of the blue zones in Loma Linda in California, where people live up to 10 years longer compared with the general US population. And there was a large group of people who ate only 2 meals a day, breakfast and lunch, and they had a much better weight management. And many people contribute their longevity, partly to eating a plant-based diet, but also partly to doing only 2 meals a day, breakfast and lunch. And I'm stressing breakfast and lunch because this is the particular way of doing intermittent fasting in the blue zones, where people live the longest and are the healthiest.
If you are eating 2 meals a day, but for a later time frame, is that more harmful than eating within the normal or generally accepted 12 to 16 hour window?
Generally speaking, the earlier you start eating your meals and the earlier you finish, the better. But there's no hard rules. It depends on what you can do. Like each one of us has a schedule and some constraints. So we do the best we can with the schedule we have. And but generally speaking, the earlier you start eating and the earlier you finish, the better.
Thank you.
I can't believe that we're out of time at this point. Dr. Kahleova, so much great information tonight. On behalf of Ben and Judy, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom and your knowledge with our community tonight. We really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me.
Plant-powered Metro New York has a lot happening in the coming weeks. I know we want to get you to understand a few of these things. And one that's really great is that we are collaborating with Dr. Kahleova's team from PCRM. When Dr. Neil Barnard comes to town for the Power Foods Revolution event at Symphony Space here in New York City on Saturday, the 5th of October at 2 p.m. On Tuesday, the 8th at 7:30 p.m., join us online as we welcome renowned vegan bodybuilder Robert Cheek, discussing how to build muscle on a plant-based diet. And the next night, one of our Food for Life classes, Let's Beat Breast Cancer, will be delivered online on the 9th, beginning at 6 o'clock by our own Louise Cohn-Silver and Judy Lemko. And finally, and this isn't all that we're doing for the month, another Food for Life class, this time a 3-part series entitled Savoring Health, Smart Eating Strategies for Men, which I'll be co-leading with Robert Klein, Anthony Spino, and Richard Basson. It's going to begin on Saturday, the 19th of October. The sessions start at 11:30 a.m., just in time so you can be there for game day as well. So with all of that said, we have a lot going on. For any further information, you can register for these and all of our other events at Plant Powered Metro New York, and why that is, .org. And on behalf of Judy and Ben, thank you for being here. If you want to watch our replays, you can do it anytime on our YouTube channel. And we hope to see you next time, and really appreciate you being here once again on Heart to Healthy Heart. Thanks so much.